It's a ticking time bomb. I am extremely concerned that people may begin to perish because of this.
So going to the water will make you sick. It's raw sewage and toxic chemicals.
The smell is a little bit different,
It's
right?
bad. The smell. That's the sewage. And we all got sick, not from being in the water, but from the stench of sewage.
The primary source of pollution to us is the Tijuana River itself.
We share a watershed with Mexico. 3/4 of the Tijuana River watershed are there. 1/4 is in the U.S. Imperial Beach is at the tail end of that watershed.
People aren't coming here as tourists. People are losing their businesses. It's a huge, huge environmental and public health, economic, and national security crisis.
That probably no one's heard of. We are the real border crisis that's happening. It's affecting 750,000 residents of South County, San Diego.
This is where it all starts. The flow from Mexico, it comes in here. This is where we take the trash out.
So this is the first phase, right?
Right.
There could be a lot of things in there, right?
Right, yeah. We've actually had a body come through here once.
So you grew up here?
I lived here for 53 years. I was the mayor of Imperial Beach for 8 years. I've been surfing here since 1977, almost 50 years.
Wow.
So I was a lifeguard here for years, made hundreds of rescues on this beach.
Wow.
Worked on the pier. So yeah, I've spent a lot of time in this water and on this beach.
We are hearing that the beach actually is closed for 3 years. Is that?
Yeah, so due to this sewage crisis and basically the falling apart of sewage treatment infrastructure in Tijuana, we've had over 1,000 days of beach closures in Imperial Beach. But then now all the way up into Coronado,
Wow.
So 12 miles of our beach in California are closed because the government of Mexico, the government of the United States, the government of Baja California, and the government of California can't figure out how to fix a sewer system. We have a $1 billion Navy SEAL training base just up the beach. They're being impacted by sewage.
They're not doing the training?
They can't do their training when the water's like this. They have to go somewhere else. They just built a brand new $1 billion special warfare base. So our most important national security assets are being undermined and threatened by toxic sewage from Mexico.
Which is the Navy SEAL training. In
Yeah, it's just
Coronado,
right. You can see it right up there. So it's just up there. This beach should be filled with people. This is the most important economic asset we have in Southern California. It's a free asset. It should bring us joy. Instead, it's making us sick. People aren't coming here as tourists. People are losing their businesses. It's a huge, huge environmental and public health, economic, and national security crisis.
Can you tell us about the fact people losing their businesses? Is it because people are not coming to the beach?
Yeah, people aren't coming to the beach. Do you see anybody here? If you were in Mission Beach or Santa Monica or Manhattan Beach or La Jolla, the beach is packed in the morning. This is, it's fall. This is prime tourist season. I was the mayor and brought record investment to Imperial Beach over an 8-year period, new hotels, new restaurants, and some of them are closing, and the hotels are losing business, which means our city loses tax revenue, because who wants to come to a beach when it's closed? Why would you spend $300 on a night on a hotel or an Airbnb if you can't go in the water? I wouldn't, and I was the mayor. That's the problem, but it's also a problem because the beach is our main street, our down-home plaza. It's where everybody comes together. So imagine what happens when the place you go to connect with your friends and families and experience the happiest times of your life now becomes the place that makes you sick. The place that you may have gotten married on the beach, or you may have, taken your mom. I get emotional thinking about it because my mom had cancer and she was dying. You take her to the beach, right? And I've talked to so many people like that. They'll walk on the pier. Sorry, it's just, think about 50 years of what we've lost here. And you can't do that anymore because the place you want to connect with your friends and family and then nature is gone. The place where you spent your entire lifetime with your kids and your parents and your friends and every day you have is now a toxic death zone, right? And so it's just awful that that's happening.
Is it a health hazard to be here? Or is it to go into the water?
So going to the water will make you sick. It's raw sewage and toxic chemicals that were banned in the United States back in the 1970s and 60s. So factories are dumping toxic waste into the water that comes in the ocean. but now we know it's in the air. Kim Prather at UC San Diego and Paula Stigler at San Diego State University are doing research on that. They're finding toxic gas in the air, and they're measuring it at the Imperial Beach Pier. They've got a sensor there, right? So we now know that it's having
So
an
in
impact.
that pier, they're measuring it, right?
They're measuring it at the lifeguard station on the beach. Yeah, and then they have sensors along the river channel. So they're measuring, I think it's toxic hydrogen sulfide in the air, right? And so when I was mayor during the pandemic, I had more people complaining about the stench of raw sewage than I did about coronavirus. So think about that. And so I get calls all the time and talk to people who say that it feels like they can't breathe anymore in their homes because when there's a bad sewage spill, the stench of sewage is so bad.
So it's affecting people even in their homes.
Yeah, affecting people in their homes. I had an office on the beach. I run an organization called Wild Coast. We had an office on the beach and we all got sick, not from being in the water, but from the stench of sewage. I had 2 sinus operations and ear surgery because I was getting so sick. So one of the most devastating things I've ever seen is we had sewage released into the National Wildlife Refuge here at the Tijuana Estuary. It's a California Marine Protected Area and a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service wildlife refuge. The oxygen levels dropped to 0 because of the sewage, and all the leopard sharks died. We have leopard sharks here, beautiful animals, friendly, docile, beautiful, all of them, hundreds of leopard sharks died. A state park employee told me just the other day, huge amounts of fish died off in the estuary because of oxygen levels going down to 0 because sewage is going into this, what is a National Wildlife Refuge. So it has a huge impact on animal health. We have blue whales and gray whales, humpback whales, orcas offshore here. This is it's called the Blue Superhighway. Animals come down the California coast and go to Mexico and even the Galapagos. Got guys fishing offshore, lobster being harvested. So all that's being impacted by this toxic sewage.
You were the mayor for many years and you will be working on it.
Yeah.
What was the outcome? Did you talk to
So the irony and the tragedy, contradiction of all this is that we won the battle to fix this problem. So when I was mayor, we filed a lawsuit along with the state of California, the city of Chula Vista, the Port of San Diego, the city of San Diego, and the Surfrider Foundation against the International Boundary and Water Commission, a federal agency, because they were violating the Clean Water Act and we said they needed to clean up. We won that battle. The Justice Department negotiated a settlement and we got President Trump and Nancy Pelosi negotiated the U.S. Free Trade Agreement, the USMCA agreement, and they put $300 million in the budget for the EPA. We did that in 2017 and 2019. We won. But the planning process has now taken over 5 years. So for 5 years, they've been talking about doing something, but they haven't done anything. And meanwhile, the Tijuana sewage system is just basically falling apart. And Mexico feels comfortable dumping its entire sewer system, 50 to 70 million gallons of sewage every day, into the Tijuana River and letting it go in the ocean. So that's happened really since the pandemic. And so when I was mayor, during the pandemic, we had 50 to 70 million gallons of sewage in the river every day, and no one said anything. And so that's just continued, and Mexico's trying to make improvements. The United States is trying to fix a broken sewer plant, but in the meantime, our communities are suffering. As a small town mayor, you quickly realize that managing your sewer system is the most complicated thing a city does. Every day that the guys in public works are fixing and working on a sewer system as they should. So fixing a sewer system in Tijuana isn't any more complicated than anywhere else in the world. But for some reason, the US and Mexican governments can't figure out how to fix a sewer system and have let it have this devastating impact on communities far and wide in Southern California.
The smell is a little bit different,
it's
right?
Bad. The smell, that's the sewage. Being in the beach and being in the ocean should be a pristine feeling. You should feel refreshed. And right now we can smell the sewage. The water is a little discolored. Maybe most people would notice it. I can tell. It's just a little off. You can see the inside's a little yellowish, but you can definitely smell it. And it gets worse and worse the further south you go. And when you're next to the Tijuana River, the stench is overwhelming. And there are tens of thousands of people that live in South San Diego, right on the edge of the Tijuana River in the valley, and they're smelling that all the time. And so it's having a huge impact on their physical health, but also their mental health, because they feel like they're almost being held hostage by this toxic smell.
The primary source of pollution to us is the Tijuana River itself.
Mayor Paloma Aguirre is a key stakeholder and advocate for addressing the severe sewage crisis impacting her community of Imperial Beach. Can you tell us what's going on?
Well, the cross-border pollution crisis has been affecting us for decades, but it's really worsened in the last few years. And that's because of a number of reasons. We share a watershed with Mexico. 3/4 of the Tijuana River watershed are there. 1/4 is in the U.S. Imperial Beach is at the tail end of that watershed. So we are impacted because of all of this transboundary pollution. We have a lot of ranches and farms in the river valley where a lot of people still live and have animals and whatnot. And one of these problem areas is at Saturn and Sunset, where the river is still flowing and there's so many chemicals and surfactants present there that you have right now conditions of foam being generated and up to 4 to 6 feet of foam covering the river. Unless you're wearing a respirator, you start to develop the symptoms that are consistent with hydrogen sulfide exposure, which can be nausea, dizziness, headaches. Here in Imperial Beach, we've been experiencing that for a long time. The migraines, the headaches, the shortness of breath, the sinusitis, the allergies, the asthma, some even lung lesions. So it's extremely concerning. Mm-hmm.
And what about the residents?
It's heartbreaking. I hear reports of people living in the river valley just blocks away from this area of high foam that I've been mentioning that are extremely unwell. We have a resident there that has had to call 911 at least 2 to 3 times already, experiencing shortness of breath and chest pain. We have another family, for example, Matt Henry is a young dad that has 6 young children, and they just took a road trip outside of IB, and they were doing great. And the moment they came back, his kids started to experience upper respiratory ailments like coughs and phlegm and almost asthma-like symptoms. And it just breaks your heart because we're a working class community and not everybody has the ability to just relocate if that's what they are interested in doing. So now they're just living concerned of all of this pollution having impacts on their children or on the elderly or on the immunocompromised. I hear about them all the time. I hear elderly folks that have COPD that, can't open their windows at night. And it's very challenging especially when we've had all of these heat waves that are so unusual for Southern California, because we don't have AC units in our homes. So it's very concerning.
How much pollution comes from Tijuana River, and where does that go straight to the ocean?
Absolutely, it goes straight into the ocean without any treatment. So Southern California riverine systems don't flow all the time. Unlike other rivers throughout the world, they're dry. When it doesn't rain, there's no flow. There's a number of factors that now have caused this river to flow year-round. Ironically, there's 2 sewage treatment plants on the east side of Tijuana that are treating wastewater at a very high level, up to tertiary level of treatment. But because they don't have enough purple pipes to redirect and reuse that treated wastewater, it gets discharged into the river, causing now year-round flow because there's a significant amount of treated effluent that's placed back into the river. On top of that, you have a number of renegade sewage flows throughout the city, potentially illegal dumping as well. So now we have almost 18 million gallons per day. In the last year and a half, we've seen a significant increase in flow in the river, up to 40 to 60 million gallons of flow per day. That's unheard of. We've never experienced that before. And we don't have the infrastructure on the U.S. side to divert the river flow or to treat it. There's a small level of flow that's flowing through the estuary that basically flows into our beaches. That's about 3 to 5 million gallons per day still present right now in the Tijuana River valley and estuary flowing out into our coast.
We are honored to be sponsored by Shenyun. I've been attending Shenyun performances every year as they change the choreography and music. Shenyun takes you back in time to the magical world of ancient China with unique blend of brilliant dancing, beautiful costumes, and legends coming to life. Overall, it's a very meaningful performance with a lot more than just entertainment to offer. Make sure to go see it this year. Go to shenyun.com and book your tickets today. I highly recommend it.
People nowadays go to the doctors, the psychiatrists for pills, for antidepressants. This is the antidepressant. The best.
I knew it was going to be good. It's a billion times better than I even thought it would be.
I'd heard people say, you don't want to miss this, and I would fully agree.
I'm going to tell everyone to come see it. You have to.
Definitely going to come back next year.
Totally inspirational. You have to go see this.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime must-see that will change their lives forever.
Paloma, so you're saying a lot of this sewage, all of it is coming from Mexico. Can you explain to us what's going on there?
Mexico, we knew the negative externalities from the NAFTA trade agreement would occur. And this was something that is no surprise. When you have expedited trade exchange of goods and services, it obviously is very attractive for people seeking jobs. The labor sector in Tijuana is vast and ever growing. We produce many things in Tijuana because, we have this trade agreement with Mexico. Just as an example, about 70% of our electronics are assembled there. So there's a very significant influx into the city because of those reasons, and just for the fact that it's a border city, right? And people are trying to migrate or live in the transboundary region of the U.S.-Mexico border. So Mexico has the challenge to provide infrastructure for a very high number of people. It's almost the exact same population as the city of San Diego, but with a fraction of the resources. So the wastewater system is extremely stressed. And then on top of that, you have a combined stormwater and sewage system as well. So anytime it rains, you have breaks that happen because of stormwater, but produce sewage spills into the system. And as I was mentioning, we share the watershed with Tijuana, but the city of Tijuana is on average 300 feet above sea level. So all of that pollution drains down across the border through the river valley estuary and into the ocean. So it's very challenging for them to keep up with the sufficient infrastructure, and the result of it is both of our nations are severely affected by all of this pollution. We're past the narrative, past the discussions of we need to fix it at the source because that takes too long. And now we're experiencing the effects of those decisions. Not to say they were right or wrong. We're just at an inflection point where we have people becoming severely ill. We have a situation that has now been declared as a public health crisis by our county board of supervisors in San Diego. It's a ticking time bomb. I am extremely concerned that people may begin to perish because of this. So we cannot afford to wait to work through diplomatic channels across the border. Whatever that work looks like, and when it comes to fruition, great. That'll be the cherry on top. But for now, we need immediate interventions and infrastructure on the U.S. side to protect the close to 750,000 residents of the South Bay.
Is the sewage going into the ocean, but there's a facility that's doing treatment. Can you explain the dynamics there?
Sure. That treatment plant, I think, is a great example of binational cooperation. It was built in the mid-90s following the NAFTA trade agreement It's one of the first of its kind. It's entirely located on U.S. soil, but it treats wastewater from Mexico. 100% of the wastewater it treats, it's coming from the city of Tijuana.
This is where it all starts. The flow from Mexico, it comes in here. So this is our first encounter with the water where we remove the trash. We don't want trash going through the system. It gets in the pumps, gets in valves. It's a wear and tear. It's not good. So
this is the first phase, right?
Right. So
there's a lot of there could be a lot of things in there, right?
Right. Yeah. We've actually had a body come through here once.
Wow.
We had a dog come through here that lived.
Wow.
So yeah, you get all kinds of stuff in here. So when the trash goes on a conveyor belt, it goes next door, and it drops in these bins. When the bins are filled, we'll take them out of here, and then we'll take it to Mexico and dump it somewhere. We already take it as much as we can. And their pump stations right now, I think, is probably pumping as much as they can also, but they're still flowing the river. So they need to try to find the sources of these flows in the river and stop those. They also need to increase the capacity of their pump stations so they can pump more of it down south. Now keep in mind, it goes down south and it's discharged in the ocean. It's still not treated. This is a biological process. So we have bacteria in the water here, east of dissolved solids. So we keep track of the bacteria, the oxygen level to make sure the bacteria is healthy and is doing its job. So the flow is going this way in each one of these cells. It's going that way. It's going that, yeah. When we expand the plant from 25 million gallons per day to 50, we have all this land. This is all IBWC property, so we'll just kind of spread out that way. Lots of room to grow.
So to fix the river issue, you have to probably install another one of these, or I don't know how big is it.
Well, that's a good point. So we're going to double the size of this plant.
Oh, okay.
That's the big project that we awarded just recently. So over the next 5 years, we're going to go from 25 million gallons per day to 50. So the more we treat here, it means the less that Mexico dumps in the ocean, or the less there is in the river.
Do you think that's enough?
Probably not. I don't think it'll be enough, no. From this over here, the sludge goes on its conveyor belts. You can see right through there, it goes up.
These belts, yeah.
Right, and all the way up.
And then goes in.
And then if you see, it just drops into the trucks on a regular, and these trucks come in and out of here all day, all week, because the plant is running all the time. We don't shut down at night, so we're always generating sludge. Yeah. And when they're full, they head out, go to Mexico, and they dump it.
And they come back, right?
Right, and they come back. Yeah. So we usually do about 6 to 8 loads a day.
Tijuana, up until the 1990s, did not have an adequate collection system.
David Gibson is a water expert. He'll give us the historical context and insight into the current state of the sewage infrastructure and challenges facing the Tijuana River watershed. David, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You're a water expert. Can you, in your experience, can you tell us what's happening with this Tijuana River?
So over the decades, even beginning back in 1955, when the Water Board asked the federal government to intervene on sewage issues, the sewage issues have plagued the Tijuana River watershed. And by that, I mean the lower part of the watershed. The upper watershed is actually some of the cleanest waters we have in both countries. But it's the final 12 or 15 miles of the river that are grossly polluted by sewage, industrial runoff and releases, stormwater runoff, and trash. That condition has continued over the decades. And even though we made a lot of improvements with wastewater control in the 1990s, Tijuana, as I said, has outgrown that system, and we're now back to where we started from, with significant daily flows of sewage in the river, an ability in Mexico to get the infrastructure in place that it needs to be to treat it and collect it and discharge it safely offshore. We made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, but we're still far from the goal of having a sewage-free river.
I assume there's some level of treatment there in Mexico?
No, you'd be surprised. So in that 1990 treaty minute the two countries signed, they agreed to several things. One was the installation of a river diversion system, which is called PBCLA, the acronym for the pump station. It can capture and divert now up to 35 million gallons of runoff per day, which right now is largely sewage. And it pumps it to the coast where it's discharged untreated onto the coast. Up until very recently, that pump station couldn't operate because between that pump station and the coast is another pump station and a pipeline that were compromised 2 years ago. Those have finally been restored to service, and PBCLA can operate at least partially. The treatment plant itself takes 25 million gallons of flow a day from the collection system, not from the river. A common misunderstanding is that the treatment plant treats the river. It does not. The U.S. side treatment plant in San Ysidro only treats sewage from Tijuana. But the river flows, when they're diverted to the coast, they're not treated. They're discharged on the shoreline. All of the local agencies and the regional board all agreed that one of the outcomes we wanted to see from the litigation we filed was a river diversion system that brought the wastewater flows into the U.S. from the river, treated them, and then discharged them together with the treated wastewater offshore as a superior alternative to discharging untreated wastewater and industrial releases right on the shoreline where it flows north on the onshore current back into the U.S.
In terms of the solutions that are currently planned to increase the size of this plant on the border side, is that going to have a big impact on this situation?
Yes, it will. And I think it's fair to mention right now, to reference a question you asked a moment ago, there are 3 wastewater treatment plants in Tijuana itself. There's La Morita and Arturo Herrera, which are modern treatment plants, but they only treat about 12 to 15 million gallons of wastewater per day. And because that wastewater right now has no use, it's discharged to the river, treated, but it quickly becomes polluted as soon as it reaches the river. And at San Antonio de los Buenos, they are expanding and building a new treatment plant there, which will treat 18 million gallons of wastewater to secondary, but discharge it on the shoreline. But that doesn't provide for all of Tijuana's sewering needs. There's a large volume of wastewater which can't be accommodated at those 3 treatment plants or at the current international wastewater treatment plant due to its size limitations. So the idea to expand that, the proposal to expand that treatment plant from 25 million gallons per day to 50 million gallons per day is a huge step in the right direction. It captures more of Tijuana's wastewater capacity that needs to be treated. It treats it to a high standard when the treatment plant is fully operational and compliance to at least secondary. That water could be made available for return to Mexico if they wish, for domestic reuse, like we're doing in San Diego with the Pure Water Project. That's one of the options that was studied. And otherwise, it would result in it being discharged 3.5 miles offshore at a secondary treated level, better, in fact, than what's being treated at Point Loma right now. Tijuana is in a much more dire water situation in terms of supply than San Diego. They're currently having to buy water from San Diego at a rather high price. They need all the water they can get, being at the end of the Colorado River and having to share that water with farmers in Mexicali. So there's some real long-term climate change benefits from being able to recycle and reuse this wastewater.
You're going to see massive amount of construction. So this is really the start of that.
Dr. Maria-Elena Giner is the commissioner with the International Boundary and Water Commission, IBWC. Her agency is tasked with addressing the sewage crisis on the U.S. side. You know, we are very concerned about Tijuana River. There has been beach closures in San Diego, and this has been a big problem.
Right.
In terms of you guys are investing in plants here. There's a plant here that we actually visited.
Right.
And you're trying to double the capacity
Correct.
of this plant. How does that impact this picture?
So right now, the way the system works is about most of our defensive measures are all in Mexico, where river water is taken from the river, pumped over multiple canyons to the coast. And that's very expensive, and it's an old system, and we're subject to Mexico's maintenance. Mexico has less resources than the United States. So doubling the size of our plant will allow reduction of that pump to their Mexican coast. It will all start to flow by gravity to our plant. So it gives us more control on the defensive measures on the U.S. side. That doesn't mean that that will not require them to pump water from the river, but it will start to reduce the flow.
And what does the picture look like down the line for the residents that are in this community after these investments? Because there's a lot of investments coming in.
Right. So the cost of expanding and rehabilitating our plant is on the order of $600 million. Thus far, we've secured $400 million because of the support and advocacy that we have gotten from the residents, because of the support that we've gotten from members of Congress, as well as the administration to support this advancement of funding for this cause. Before that, this agency only received for the entire border, an average of $32 million in construction for the entire border. And we manage 500 miles of levees, 2 international dams, 5 diversion dams, 2 ports of entry, and 2 wastewater treatment plants, because we have one here, we have one in Nogales. It doesn't take rocket science to say why only 32 million, right? Well, at that time when I started here at the IBWC, they had been giving us that on average, but we had almost $200 million of unobligated funds. So Congress is not going to give you more money until you start spending the money you have. So the first thing we did was we obligated just about all of that money. All of those projects are out for construction, and Congress saw, okay, we can give you more money and we will put it to good use. And that's why this project was prioritized as part of that, right? So now we're in a position where Congress does want to give us more money to address this issue, and that will be really useful because we want to get to 600 million. Right now we have 400 million. The FY25 budget has an additional 100 million for this project, so that will be very useful. So as we go through our annual funding appropriation, that will hopefully fill the gap. Now, is this all the money we need? No. We are just playing catch up right now. We are catching up to a decade worth of lack of investment in this wastewater treatment plant. Between 2010 and 2020, only $4 million was invested in this plant. And this is not an old plant. It was built in 1997. That combined with the lack of investment in Mexico really got us to where we're at now. So in August of 2022, we signed an agreement with Mexico called a MINIT. That is a contractually international agreement. It's a tool that the IBWC uses to make agreements with Mexico. And we agreed that we would double the size of our plant, and they would invest $144 million in infrastructure for 15 projects. So far, Mexico has secured about 40% of their funding. We are barely in year 2.5 of this. It's a 5-year agreement. So they're pretty good in terms of securing funding. In Mexico, there's no carryover from year to year. So their projects are sized for 1 year's worth of funding. So we're doing really well with regards to that. It would not be helpful for them to have all the funding at this point because they would not be able to implement it. This combination of funding in Mexico plus the expansion of the plant is envisioned to reduce untreated wastewater in Tijuana by 90%. Okay, so there's always going to be fugitive flows, and we will continue monitoring that. But this is where we're going to get right now. What's going to be needed in the future? This momentum that we have cannot drop off. It needs to continue moving forward. Otherwise, we will start slipping back into deferred maintenance and then getting back into the situation where we have these unacceptable flows in the river.
How long do you think it will take for this project to get to the level where the community would feel it, like the smell is gone?
Right. Reducing the risk is going to take about 3 to 5 years. But I think there's going to be incremental improvements as we go along, as Mexico builds their infrastructure and we start to slowly ramp up our infrastructure. Because although the plant is envisioned to be doubled in capacity, rehabilitated, there's about $150 million worth of just rehabilitation needs. So doing that while operating the plant is a very complex piece of the construction, right? So we're rehabilitating the plant while it's operating, and we're doubling the capacity. You know, a typical project of that size will be 5 to 7 years. Because of the contractual arrangements that we have one contractor that's going to do the construction and the design. It's called a progressive design build. We are envisioning that they're going to be able to reduce the schedule. We just kicked that off. We don't have a firm schedule yet, but we should be having one by the spring of 2025.
Now, in terms of the beaches in southern part of San Diego, do you think after you guys do all these projects, will it get to a point where it will be completely like the rest of San Diego?
Absolutely. But it has to continue. Maintenance has to continue. Maintenance on our plant and maintenance in Mexico. Investment in our plant and investment in Mexico. the levels of funding that were coming to this region for the plant cannot be at the levels that were in the past. Only $4 million in this plant, right? There's got to be a consistent level of funding that goes into this plant. We don't have those numbers yet. We will be having those numbers by March of 2025, but we should be investing on a regular basis into this plant. In the last 2 years, we've invested $31 million in the plant. In 10 years, it was $4 million, right? So that gives you an idea of the increase of the magnitude of the funding that needs to come to this plant so that we can be able to maintain it. The other thing is that the International Boundary and Water Commission, we have a duplicate agency in Mexico, right? We have to continue those discussions with Mexico and creating metrics where we can see how much of their wastewater they're treating, how they're maintaining their system, because if we don't, and we don't monitor that on a year-to-year basis, it will start to slip. What is the advantage that brings? If we see that they're starting to slip in their investment, then we can have advocates here, the U.S. federal government speak to the Mexican federal government about bringing more investment to the region.
And when they're not investing, there could be more flow of sewage into the river, right?
Correct. They'll start to have collapsed sewer lines. Mostly that is the big issue, is collapsed sewer lines. They also have 2 other wastewater treatment plants. So maintenance in those plants are really important. And obviously maintaining the brand new plant that they're building is going to be really important, because that's how this all started. In 2017, that plant on the coast stopped treating wastewater, and then the wastewater started flowing north, which started to initially close the beaches during certain periods of time. Now, because of the flow in the river, the beaches have been closed all year. And that's what we want to get to, is having our beaches open during non-rainy season.
Yeah.
Correct.
Do you have any other thoughts for our audience?
Yes, I think that what I want people to walk away with is that there's a lot of heart that's going in from people here at IBWC to get this resolved. We don't want communities to be negatively impacted. It is completely unacceptable that they don't have access to a public amenity like a beach. It's completely unacceptable that they don't feel comfortable because of air quality concerns. We are catching up, and I ask for the patience, but we are going to be identifying all the potential opportunities to reduce timelines. But after we've caught up, we need to move from a reactive mode to a proactive mode. And the IBWC is working on 3 foundational studies so that we can do that. One is we've completed a manpower study that has demonstrated that the agency needs about 20% more staff to maintain the infrastructure that we have. The second thing that we've done is we've created an asset management area that has inventoried all of the components of our wastewater treatment plants, of our gauging stations, of our vehicles, and we'll be setting up a computerized maintenance system that's going to tell us how much money this agency needs to properly maintain this infrastructure. This asset management is going to take 3 to 5 years because it's got to include our dams, it's got to include our ports of entry, it's got to include our levees. But our first focus is our wastewater systems, which are 2 of them, the one here and the one in Nogales. And our third foundational study that we're doing is our capital plan, a capital plan that looks out 20 to 30 years to identify those needs. So this is going to be all the information that community is going to need to know. So they need to continue advocating that this region receive the adequate funding it needs to maintain what we're doing right now. This cannot stop with just this major focus now. If it does, we will start slipping back and having this issue again.
Dr. Maria-Elena Giner, a commissioner with IBWC. It was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you, Siamak. It has been my pleasure and really grateful for this opportunity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's excellent.